It's a funny place to be, stuck in a seemingly mundane world with an inner knowing that the universe is so much more than our mortal minds can comprehend. Yet we all have the capacity to know peace and our oneness with the wholeness of life. And through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share this possibility. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and this is the Kriya Yoga Podcast. Often we imagine what we consider to be enlightenment or self-realization or the self to be something attained. And we talk that way sometimes because it helps for the effects of teaching. But the simple fact is, Ramana Maharshi talked about this. Roy Eugene Davis, I've heard say this, even Yogananda, and even Jesus in the Bible would say that heaven is here now, enlightenment is here now, the self is here now. Where else could it be? It can't rise, it can't fall, it's always there. And what we're doing with our yoga practice, as you know from studying the Bhagavad Gita and studying the Yoga Sutras, is we are removing the obstacles, removing the coverings which reveal that. Essentially what we're doing is we're removing our attention from the things that block the experience of clarity, of peace, of self, of enlightenment, of self-realization. And this is a hard thing to do because oftentimes we don't know anything else other than the stuff that's blocking the experience. And we feel more comfortable looking at things that, we're comfortable with, that we know, that we can say, I know what that is. And this came up last weekend when I was speaking at a Unity Church in Charleston, West Virginia. Someone brought up the Bhagavad Gita, and that's the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, how there's the war, there's the conflict. And they were kind of asking if we can just sort of skip that part. And I don't think you can. But as we discussed in that class, the conflict is necessary. It seems like it's going to be extremely traumatic and difficult, just like it seems to us oftentimes like if we pull away from all the stuff that we know or that we're comfortable with, well, then what's left? And we're going to feel lonely and afraid and ungrounded and unmoored. Well, you might for a little while until you get your feet under you again. But in the Bhagavad Gita, there is this war, and Arjuna, which is representative of the aspirant, the spiritual aspirant, you, me, is put in the situation where he has to slay his kinsman. On one side of the battlefield are his family. On the other side of the battlefield is also his family. Now we have to remember that this is a metaphor. And the side that has to be slain, they're described as sons and brothers and grandfathers and cousins. And they are those things. Like, for example, for you to get where you are now, you had to develop a sense of I, a sense of separate existence. You had to have memory to remember what you've been up to keep it all together as a human being. But in time, just like in all things, once that serves its purpose, then you let it go. And so slaying one's kinsman, slaying one's small sense of self, the personality, slaying one's tendency to latch onto memories and be attached to things, those are family members because they are things that have helped us get to the point that we are now. But to keep moving in our growth process, those things have to be let go. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because the majority of everyone that you know and everyone on this planet is still highly identified with human consciousness. And they want to be identified with human consciousness. They like it. They like the struggle. They like having babies and making money and the rise and fall of fame and the gambling of the whole experience. They like all these things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're interested in yoga practice, well, there's an indication there that you are getting ready to graduate from all that stuff, which is why you begin to study things like the Bhagavad Gita or practice meditation. But you are still so steeped in where you've come from, the majority of human consciousness, because you're just starting to kind of wake up to something a little bit more, that of course it's hard to look around and let go of all that, because that's where faith comes in, some kinds of faith anyway. So we have to recognize that this is the state of things for us. And those of you who've studied the book, The Holy Science, or participated in that class, which again, I'm going to offer that before a few months. I will do that again. But as Sri Yukteswar describes, there is this kind of natural involution and evolution of consciousness. And even the book, The Holy Science, can't do it justice. It's also, in a way, kind of a metaphor. It's just words to give you an idea of how the process kind of goes. But consciousness is one thing. It's infinite, it's vast, it's whole, it's serene. And then seemingly, like a dream, and I say seemingly because nothing really ever changes, it's just our perception, there is more involvement with the idea of being a separate being, then more involvement with this idea of matter, and then doing things with matter, then expressing through matter, then becoming something. But if you remember from the Holy Science, and if not, don't worry about it, we'll get to it eventually. Once you reach the human consciousness, then there's what's called Devata consciousness, which many people mistranslate as like angels, but it's not like angels like, Hallmark card angels. They're just beings with greater clarity and awareness. And then even that, the sannyasi, the supremely free. And when we engage in yoga practice, well, now we're starting with this baseline of human experience, and we're starting to look towards these other ways of being, which is natural to us. It's just part of our life cycle. Like a caterpillar or a grub is part of the life cycle of a moth or a butterfly. They look radically different, but they are the same thing. Or the egg is radically different from the larva. So the human level, or the human experience, is just one of those stages. And the difficulty is that so many people get caught up in that stage. It's like they want to stay a caterpillar because they're used to it. They like it. They don't want to create the chrysalis or the cocoon, which is like what you do with yoga practice. That's creating the chrysalis and the cocoon. And then you have to stay there for a while, and you have to sit with it, and you're alone, and you can't move, and you can't wiggle around, but there's a change happening. And eventually you break free into being a moth or a butterfly or whatever you end up becoming. So keep this in mind, and the more you're able to wonder about, contemplate, well, how is it possible that I, the self, is always here right now? That means that as you are right now, that's it. Well, that can't be it, right? Yeah, that's what you think. I'm just Melanie, I'm just Ronnie, I'm just Samantha, I'm just Garima. How can that be it? Well, how can it not be it? Really, it's more like, there are people with big egos that think that they are everything and they're the savior of the world. Well, there's the other side of that too, where you just don't believe you're anything. Well, to not accept that you are the self, and by your personality, Garima, Glenn, Lee, Kevin, that's just part of the expression, the personality. It would be like a red blood cell going around in a human body saying, I want to be human. I want to be human. Well, it is human. It's part of the human, the red blood cell. So it's not it is human. We need all of these parts to recognize that. And just imagine if the red blood cell could just accept that, oh, I am human. I've got a little part to play in this vast human being, and I'm just swishing around in these arteries, carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide or whatever they do, iron, I don't know. Well, just imagine if they could just relax and be that red blood cell for the duration of its life. And then it's going to get recycled. It's still going to be human, but the physical, the outward is changing. So what we're doing with our yoga practice and our meditation practice is really coming to terms with the temporary aspect of ourselves, which is common to all, everyone, everything. And then digging around to recognize the essence of what you are, which is eternal, beyond the changing form. So, contemplate this. This is not something easy. It's not something usually that I'm able to describe in a matter of, 12 minutes. And then everyone says, yeah, gee, I got it. That's great. It's something you think about and you contemplate and you wonder about. And as you wonder about it and as you contemplate, how could that be true? Then you start to have little insights, little kind of revelations. And they might be words, but usually it's just like a knowing that comes around. And you have to hold on to that and let it deepen within you. And you keep wondering about it as the months and the years go by, until eventually it becomes clearer and easier to recall. Because there may be moments when you're caught up in things and it's not even there. But then when that little distraction that you have to engage in passes, the awareness comes back. Oh yeah. And this will be radically different than, say, when you first got started, when you had to sit down and really think about it hard until you had maybe 5 minutes of, okay, I get it. And that was all you had throughout the rest of the day. And then you went and were mostly unconscious. Then you came back again and meditated again. And you had it just a little bit, and then it slipped away. As the months and years go by, that little bit that you're trying to cling on to so tightly as a realization becomes more accessible. It's as though all you have to do is just take a moment and attune to it, and there you've got it again. And then eventually it will become more and more permanent. At least that's how the theory goes, right? So this is a process that we go through. And it's important to remember that.
This episode of the Kriya Yoga Podcast was made possible by donations from Kriya Yoga Apprenticeship students and supporters of our Patreon community at www.patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.